What is HIV? Everyone wants to have a healthy body. Our bodies are designed in some ways like these doors to keep out disease and keep us healthy. The pictures on this cube will tell you about a very serious infection that kills many people. This infection is caused by a virus called HIV. This virus leads to a sickness we call AIDS. HIV is real. HIV can be spread to others, but the good news is that there are things we can do so that we do not become infected with HIV, which leads to AIDS. When a person first becomes infected with HIV, they do not look sick. Once HIV comes into the body, it is there to stay. The infected person will after some time, sometimes even many years, go on to get the condition we call AIDS, which leads to an early and often painful death. There are things we do to open the door to HIV. There are things that others do to us that also opens the door to HIV. There are some things we can do to protect ourselves from HIV. First, we will talk about ways that we can open the doors to HIV and AIDS, so we will know how to protect ourselves. How is HIV spread? HIV is passed on when blood or sexual fluids from an HIV-infected or HIV-positive person enter the body of an uninfected or HIV-negative person. Having sex with someone who has been infected by HIV or is considered to be HIV positive opens your body's doors to HIV. This is the most common way to get infected. Sometimes this sex happens when you do not want it, for example in rape or violent sex. HIV can be passed from an HIV-infected mother to her unborn or newly born baby. This may happen in the womb, during birth, or during breastfeeding. Not all babies born to mothers living with HIV will be infected. A pregnant woman living with HIV can take medicines to help prevent her baby from becoming infected with HIV. The choice of feeding methods are also important. By sharing needles, blood containing HIV can be passed from one person to another. This includes using needles for sharing illegal and dangerous drugs. HIV can be passed on by receiving blood from someone who has HIV. This can happen through blood transfusion or any kind of shared skin cutting or piercing instruments, like razor blades for barbering, tribal markings, and circumcision. Now we will talk about how the HIV virus is not passed on. HIV is not spread by holding hands or casual contact. HIV is not spread by sharing bathing water. HIV is not spread by insect bites such as mosquitoes or flies. HIV is not spread by eating together and sharing utensils. If you take care when handling body fluids, you can live alongside or care for people living with HIV and not get infected with HIV. It is important to encourage and care for people living with HIV and AIDS. Let's talk about how you can know whether or not you are infected with HIV. Get tested. Knowing if you have HIV or not is the first step to protecting yourself and others. We call this knowing your HIV status. These people look healthy. Most people living with HIV also look healthy. You can't tell by looking at someone's face or body if they are HIV positive. It is only later, when HIV becomes AIDS, that a person starts to look sick. When you go to a hospital or clinic to be tested, it may help to take a good friend or family member with you. Show love by being tested and by encouraging your family and friends to be tested. If you test HIV negative, you will see on the next panel what you need to do to protect yourself in the future. If you test HIV positive, there are things you can do to protect others and to help you live longer and have better quality life. Now let's look at how you can protect yourself from HIV. Since sex is specially designed for marriage, we can guard our hearts and bodies for our one future spouse by abstaining from sex until marriage. As sexual contact with someone who is HIV positive is the major cause of spreading HIV, understanding that sex is designed to be shared in marriage between one man and one woman is very important. Faithfulness between husband and wife is the foundation of a lasting, joyful marriage and is most likely to prevent HIV coming into your body. If your marriage partner was HIV positive before he or she married you, you can still be infected with HIV, even when you are both faithful inside marriage. The more sexual partners you have, the more likely you are to have HIV. Accept a blood transfusion only when the blood has been tested or screened and declared safe from HIV. Do not share needles or any kind of skin cutting or piercing instrument. Also, be very careful when dealing with any blood or body fluids, for instance, in an emergency or when caring for others. Go for HIV testing and counseling so that you know your HIV status. This is especially important if you are planning to marry. If you do not know your own or your partner's HIV status, use a condom correctly and every time you have sex. This will lower the risk of HIV infection, but try to also persuade him or her to be tested for HIV. Now we will show what steps to take if you test HIV positive. What should you do if you test HIV positive? One of the most powerful ways of slowing the spread of HIV is telling others your HIV status if you test positive for HIV. This is the first step in protecting others. You can then make sure that your behavior does not cause them to be at risk. You can extend your life and improve your quality of life by following these simple steps. Eating a healthy diet is an important part of keeping your body healthy. Smoking cigarettes and drinking alcohol lower your body's ability to stay strong. Alcohol use often leads to risky behavior. Leading a full, active life and maintaining your social and spiritual ties to others helps keep your body and mind strong. Taking ARV medicines when it becomes necessary is the best way of delaying AIDS. These medicines must be taken every day to keep HIV under control. Unless you have an HIV test and find out if you have HIV, you will not know if and when you need these medicines. Now we will talk about some of the ways we can help those of us living with HIV and AIDS. Encourage, empower, and embrace people living with HIV. Reach out and build hope on a foundation of love for people living with HIV and their families. This is the best way to remove the stigma and fear of HIV and AIDS. You can provide personal care for people living with HIV and AIDS by visiting, bathing, and dressing them once it becomes necessary. You can also read, talk, and pray with them. You can empower people living with HIV to live as normally as possible by carrying water, working on their farms, preparing meals, and caring for their children. You can empower people with HIV and AIDS by helping them to prepare wills, write letters, and give end-of-life instructions. You can transport people living with HIV and AIDS to their hospital or clinic for visits. You can encourage them to take their ARV medications on a consistent basis. Most importantly, embrace people living with HIV and their families, showing them love. This helps remove stigma, restores dignity, and gives hope. Remember, get tested. Know your status. If you are living with HIV, live responsibly and positively to lengthen your life. All of us need to empower, encourage, and embrace people living with HIV or AIDS, and all of us can pass on this life-saving information.